My family's been here since 1688. I'm the 9th generation of my family here. Don't beat yourself up about the fact that you're not a South Africa expert. South Africa is not for beginners. There's over 142 race laws currently in South Africa to protect against the tyranny of the majority.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's amazing guest is a gentleman all the way from South Africa, and that gentleman is Ernst von Sale. How are you doing? And thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for the invite, Nick. Are some of those masks behind you from Southern Africa? They do seem to have an African theme to them.
I got them from Soweto 25 years ago when I was backpacking around South Africa.
Yeah, no, it looks like the type of art you see in this part of the world, so I immediately recognize it.
Yeah. My back wall is all my mementos from all the traveling I've done over decades and decades. This office is just full. My wife calls it full of my crap.
Well, your audience is probably already quite intimate, intimately know all the different decorations behind you. You've probably talked about them, I assume.
Yeah, absolutely. At the bottom, you can't see it now. I've got some little pictures of Che Guevara from when I went to Cuba, obviously. I had to put him on near the floor so you can't see him. Because every time I did a podcast, I would get a million comments. You're a socialist, you're a commie. It's like, no, I'm not a socialist or a commie. I bought that because his picture reminds me of my time in Cuba. I have a crucifix behind me. I'm not religious. It's just things I picked up, but people see certain things and think, you're that, and I'm sick of you. It's crazy.
Well, you've got a boomerang there, so you're probably Australian then as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw you a month ago. I think it was the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. And I thought, he's a man I want to talk about because I'm writing a book at the moment and there's a little bit, and I want to talk about South Africa, the collapse of South Africa over the last few decades. And when I saw you speak, I thought I need to speak to him. So first of all, you work for an agency, an organization called Afrey Forum. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So I'm the head of public relations at Afrey Forum, and Afrey Forum is the largest civil rights and constitutional rights organization on the African continent, but also the largest community-based solutions organization on the African continent based on our amount of membership. So our organization is built on a membership model where you become a member by being a donating member every month, and we have 315,000 members. It's not as simple as just liking a Facebook page. You actually have to be a regular contributor to be able to be considered a member. And we have 315,000 of those. And then we also have over 170 branches all across South Africa, all in all different communities, in all the provinces that organize those communities to tackle the problems that they face in particular, specifically problems where the government is failing to address those problems. And we can get into that. That relates to the topic of what's been going on in South Africa for the last 30 years. But in short, there's been a deterioration of state capacity, and the state wants to do a lot of things but can't very clearly. And Afrey Forum is one of the reactions to that. Citizens organizing, communities organizing, saying, well, then we'll roll up our sleeves and do it ourselves.
Yeah, and we need more grassroots in my country as well, more grassroots organizations holding councils, government, politicians to account. It's the only way you get anything done. You can't leave it to the state to fix your problems because they never do it.
You'll be waiting forever.
Absolutely. And I used to work in government. I know exactly how long you wait, and it is forever. Let me quickly tell you what the average British person thinks of South Africa, and then you can dispel parts of this if we're wrong. So our general view of South Africa is you're the bottom side of the world, and up to 20, 30 years ago, evil white people were running the country at the detriment of black people under something called apartheid. Then the second coming of a wonderful man called Nelson Mandela came along. He sacrificed himself in jail for 27 years, got out of jail, became president, and then the country started to change. And we all should shout hallelujah. Suddenly, the evil white people are put in their place, black people running a black majority country, and we were going to get a wonderful utopia. That's what most people in this country will quickly say is the recent history of South Africa. How much is that is correct, and how much of that is propaganda or just completely wrong?
Hmm. So, firstly, I just want to put a footnote there for your audience. Um, if you are not a boffin or an expert on South Africa, that doesn't make you strange. That doesn't make you an anomaly. That's the norm. We don't expect people to be experts on South Africa, that people that come from the UK or from America or Europe. It is not the center of the world. It is far removed from many of the big centers in the world where a lot of the major events happen. It is a fascinating country, fascinating history, and a fascinating present. But at the same time, don't beat yourself up about the fact that you're not a South Africa expert. South Africa is not for beginners. It's a very complex place, and it has a complex history and a complex present, and will definitely have a complex future. When it comes to particularly your description there, that seems to be the norm, bare bones idea that people abroad have of South Africa. But when it comes to particularly the post 1994 South Africa, a lot of the utopia that was promised has not materialized, particularly in regards to minorities being promised that they will be protected, that there will be equal rights when it comes to there will be a non-racial society, there will be no discrimination. None of these things have come to pass. The South African government is one of the most race obsessed in the world. I would go as far as to say the most race obsessed, based on the amount of race laws on the books, and we can get more into those details if you want. But just quickly there. There's over 142 race laws currently in South Africa, and I think that qualifies the South African government, as the most race obsessed and racialist in the world. I'd love to see someone show me another country with more race-based laws. I've not been able to find one. And then, of course, when it comes to the experience as a minority group in South Africa, whether that be a linguistic, cultural, or racial minority, the South African dispensation post 1994 has left a lot to be desired when it comes to the protection of minority rights. Protecting minorities, it's not even absurd demands. Things like there should not be chants about murdering minorities based on their identity. Unfortunately, that guarantee has not been able to be made. There should not be threats against people's right to private property, especially when they are a minority group who are much more vulnerable to threats to private property rights. It's that old joke of is a democracy a 51% vote that we're taking the property of 49% of the population? That's particularly why minority groups need private property rights to protect against the tyranny of the majority. Basic things like can there be guarantees that there will be no discriminatory laws that target these minority groups? Unfortunately, that as well has not materialized. So post 1994 South Africa has been a country ruled by a government that's firstly incredibly race obsessed, secondly is openly socialist and leftist, is extremist in many of its policies, its left-wing policies, and then thirdly a government that does nothing about incitement of violence against minorities in South Africa, a government that actually turns a blind eye to violent crime phenomena that particularly affect minority groups in South Africa, specifically like the farm attacks and farm murders. That doesn't mean that farmers of other race, non-minority races, are not affected by farm murders, but minority groups like the Afrikaners, for example, are intimately, as a cultural group, intimately connected to the profession of farming. So, of course, that cultural minority is going to be disproportionately affected by phenomena like violent crime phenomena like farm murders, farm attacks, incitement of violence against farmers, incitement of violence against minorities, and threats to private property rights, especially private property rights of farmers. So post 1994, South Africa has not, in regards to guarantees to protect the rights of minorities, has failed in so many regards. That's the story of the 21st century South Africa that unfortunately a lot of people abroad are still unaware of, and a lot of people inside South Africa are too ashamed of to admit.
You paint a terrible picture there. Let's have a chat about crime in South Africa. I think it was 1999 or 2000 when I was there, and I spent about 1 or 2 months backpacking around. Absolutely beautiful country. Let's talk about crime. I've probably got 4 memories of South Africa when it comes to crime. The first one is Cape Town. Sorry, not Cape Town, but just generally South Africa. South Africa was the only place I've ever visited. I've been to nearly 100 countries. South Africa was the only place where I constantly felt on edge. Even in tourist areas, I felt on edge. I don't know why. I just had this sense. My second memory was walking past this house, and it had electric fences with a sign on it. And the sign said, "Trespassers will be shot. Survivors will be shot again." And that just makes me smile, always made me laugh. And the next one was I was getting my hair cut in Johannesburg in one of the suburbs. And it was a black lady cutting my hair, and we're having a chat about England and South Africa. I'd only been there a day. And she said, "What are you doing the rest of the day?" I said, "Oh, I'm going to get on the bus and I'm going to downtown Joburg." And she went, "No, please, please don't go." She goes, "My husband's black, and if he has to go downtown Joburg, him and his 3 friends all go together because they will never go by themselves, and they're black. Please, please tell me you're not going to go there on your own." She scared the bejesus out of me. I ended up not going. So that was 1999. But from what I've seen, mainly from social media and the news, crime is a lot worse now than it was then. I've seen videos of political leaders at demonstrations shouting "death to the Boer, we want to kill the Boer, kill the farmers." And they excuse that by saying, "Oh, these are old chants and it doesn't mean what you think they mean." Well, I'm English. I speak English. You're saying it in English. I know what you're saying. I know the meaning of those words. How bad is crime in South Africa at the moment?
Right. So, I mean, you can do an entire episode, just a deep dive on all the different violent crime phenomena and other crimes that are flourishing in South Africa, particularly organized crime. But it's once again a story of a government that has woefully just failed to get crime under control. Violent crimes like murder are worsening in regards to the murder rate. Violent crimes are skyrocketing. It continues to increase. The government is not getting it under control. The police are completely overwhelmed. And this is also the context within which you see a lot of community-based initiatives come to the fore to, out of necessity, fight back against crime. So, for example, from Afrey Forum side, we have over 175 neighborhood watchers all across the country. They patrol their communities every week, and these are volunteers. They don't get paid to do what they do. They do it because they have to. Otherwise, their communities would be a lot less safe and a lot more chaotic. And it's not just Afrey Forum. Many other organizations and communities are also organizing their own neighborhood watches, and many times in close cooperation with local police. The local police are often just very glad for the assistance. So it once again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but many of the problems that you see in South Africa in 2021, in the 21st century in 2025, all go back to government failure. Not just government failure at one point, chronic government failure. And the best example of that is the electricity crisis that we find ourselves in, and we can talk about that as well if you want. But when it comes to specifically the violent crime problem in South Africa, very bad things are happening in South Africa. Do not believe the the privileged people on the richest 1% of South Africans posting beautiful pictures online, mocking Donald Trump for daring to say there are bad things happening in South Africa. You have to be really, really seriously disconnected from reality to deny a simple statement as there are bad things happening in South Africa. And that's the truth. There are terrible things happening in South Africa, and we shouldn't be scared to talk about these topics just because, oh, well, then people will think South Africa is all South Africans are bad people and South Africa is just overall a terrible place. No, but because that would be lying if you were not honest about the reality. South Africa is an amazing place. I still live in South Africa. I plan to live here for the rest of my life. My family's been here since 1688. I'm the ninth generation of my family here. Um, but at the same time, your country, you don't just talk about the great things and beautiful things about your country. You should also be honest about the bad things going on there. Otherwise, you're just acting like an ostrich and shoving your head in the ground, and you're being dishonest when people are, for example, when a world leader like Donald Trump says there are bad things happening in South Africa. How absurd does that make you look when you then immediately jump up and say, no, there's nothing wrong because I've got a beautiful view from my mansion in my Gulf estate?
Mm. If we're going to fix problems, the first thing we need to do is highlight and admit there is a problem that needs fixing in the first place. Otherwise, you don't fix it. Can you put a little bit of meat on the bones about what type of crime are you suffering from, and how horrendous is it? Because people in England might be thinking, oh, your muggings are out of control, street robbers are out of control. Maybe some people are being stabbed every now and again, like in the UK. But I know it's a lot worse than that. Can you put a little bit of meat on the bones and give us one or two examples of how bad it can be?
Right. So in South Africa, violent crime of all shapes and sizes is flourishing. I mean, there's 27,000 murders every year. I think the murder rate is something in the ballpark of 45 per 100,000. That's the South African murder rate. And when it comes to other violent crimes like rape, that's also a violent crime that's rife. South Africa is one of the countries in the world with the worst rape statistics last time I checked. Violent house robberies, hijackings happen often. Cash in transit heists, Wild West, where vehicles that are transporting cash are attacked with explosives and then the cash is stolen. And that's not even talking about the crimes of politicians that are looting the state coffers dry. When it comes to particularly what crime are people affected by, well, you'll be hard pressed to find a South African that'll tell you that they have never been affected by a serious form of crime. I'm not talking about a small little something was stolen from you or someone misled you in a criminal way or fraud. I'm talking about serious crimes. Every single South African that I know has been affected by a serious crime. And again, that's due to the government, the ANC, not being able to put the policies in place to put a stop to it or to mitigate it and improve the situation. They're just completely out of their depth. They can't rectify the situation because of their ideology and because of their race obsession and their obsession with cadre deployment. So cadre deployment means that every facet of the government needs to be every seat in government, every facet of the government needs to be occupied by a party loyalist. The merits of that party loyalist or the skills or experience of that person are irrelevant, or maybe third or fourth place in importance. Number one importance is party loyalty and ideological purity, which means that you have ministers and people in positions of problem solving that are there because they are party ideologues and extremists, not because they know what they're doing.
Right, let's get into this with the government now. South Africa, I think, still is the richest country in Africa. 3-4 decades ago, it was the diamond on the continent. That diamond now is tarnished and diminishing as every year goes by. We know the ANC have been in control now since the late 90s. they've not done what we wanted them to do, what the people wanted to. Why is that? The people at the top of the ANC can't be stupid. They must, these will be intelligent people. Are the problems tribal corruption? Are they basically communists? What are the underlying problems of this failing government that's been failing? It sounds like since day one.
So it's the dreadful and horrific combination of corruption, incompetence, and being drunk on ideology. But I think number one, it's the ideology. I mean, the ANC is in an alliance with the South African Communist Party. South Africa has had ministers of finance that were members of the South African Communist Party. This is not a moderate party. The ANC is a left-wing party with many extremist policies. It is not a party that respects private property rights. It is not a party that respects a free market. They are constantly increasing and trying to increase the amount of government meddling in the economy. They've created a welfare industrial complex where more than half of the population are dependent on some form of government grant, and they're proud of that fact. They celebrate that fact. The ANC does not see that as a failure. They see that as a success, because the more people you have dependent on government grants, the more people you can threaten when the elections come around. If you vote anyone else in, the taps will run dry. The ANC needs to remain in power, otherwise you lose your grants. That's how they threaten people before elections. So it's actually a quite brilliant strategy. As you said, they're not stupid. They've created this welfare setup specifically to capture people's votes permanently, because you can threaten people's livelihoods. You can destroy people by cutting off their welfare, and getting as many people dependent on welfare as possible is the goal. I mean, you see that with the unemployment rate as well. So South Africa, there's two ways to define unemployment. The one definition does not take into account people that have stopped looking for work, given up looking for work. But I think the expanded definition that takes into account those people that have given up looking for work is much more realistic. And South Africa's expanded definition unemployment rate is over 40%. The youth unemployment rate is 66+%. That's a recipe for disaster, but not for the ANC, because those are more welfare dependents. Those are more people that you can lock into the poverty trap and the welfare trap. So when it comes to the ANC's ideology, they should not be beating around the bush in regards to what they are. They are leftists. They are friends with communists. They are allies of the communists, and they enact many policies influenced by communist ideology. The ANC has never said a bad thing about a communist in their life. It's only beautiful words, only that this is the future and that we need more government intervention in every facet of society. That's the only way. And then you mix this ideological radicalism with a race obsession, with the ANC's push to make every facet of society race orientated. So every boardroom, every sports team, every classroom needs to be a perfect representation of their race criteria. And you see it play out in so many examples. I can use the rest of this conversation just giving you examples. I'll give you one or two of the worst ones or the most recent ones. In 2025, a professional cricket team in South Africa, were kicked from a tournament and fined because they had not fielded the right race criteria, or they didn't meet the right race criteria with their team. In 2018, one of the largest pharmacy chains in South Africa, Dis-Chem, they had an internal memo written by their CEO where he said that they are going to have to put a moratorium, a total freeze on any hiring or promotion of white people, lest they be fined by the government. So it's not just some race-obsessed CEO saying, well, we're going to do this race thing or this race discrimination thing. No, he's doing it because he's being threatened by the government with disastrous fines that are going to cripple his business. And that's where the South African race laws come in, where the South African government is constantly pushing for more and more legislation to discriminate based on people's skin color. This is the same government that during COVID, they created something called the Tourism Relief Fund. So the Tourism Relief Fund was to help small and family-owned businesses during the lockdowns survive going under, that they don't go bankrupt. Well, this tourism relief fund of the government came with a very, very nefarious catch. Your business needs to be managed by the right racial profile. If your business is too white, you don't qualify for this fund, and your little family business can go under. The government doesn't care. Luckily, Afrey Forum and the labor union Solidarity were able to defeat this evil fund in court, but the intention is there. You can see this. It's the combination of drunkenness on ideology, a race obsession, incompetence, and I've not even started. I haven't even started on the corruption.
Is there any signs that the people are turning against the ANC?
Well, that's the complex part when it comes to party politics. I mean, the ANC has lost support, particularly in the previous election, but that support has only transferred to other more radical parties. The MK party, the Umkhonto we Sizwe party being one of them, a radical revolutionary extremist party, and the EFF, another Marxist-Leninist party. The more moderate parties like the Democratic Alliance and the ACDP and the Freedom Front Plus are not really growing significantly. They've all reached kind of their ceiling. So there's no sign that these parties are going to be ruling South Africa anytime soon. The ANC has gone into coalition now with the Government of National Unity, but I don't really talk too much about that because the ANC have, since going into that alliance or coalition, they've still been getting everything they've wanted. So it's not really, it's pretty much de facto as if the ANC are still ruling South Africa. They're still getting exactly every policy that they want pushed through, every radical policy like the Expropriation Act that they signed into law this year, which threatens private property rights and makes expropriation of property without compensation possible.
Wow. What's the future for South Africa? Let's end on this question. Is the future for South Africa, is it light or darkness? What is the future?
In a very odd twist, you just asked the question that has the most optimistic answer. The future of South Africa is two things up. I don't always indulge in making predictions about the future. It's very perilous, but there are two things that I am certain of. The one is that the state capacity decay that we've seen happen for the past 30 years will continue. So one example of that is power generation. The government has a total monopoly on power generation through Eskom, the state power monopoly. And that power company has not been able to solve an electricity crisis that started in 2007. So I remember when I was a very young boy, I remember listening over the radio on the way to school that in 2007, that we are going to start experiencing rolling blackouts. We are still experiencing rolling blackouts in 2025, 18 years later. That's chronic government failure and chronic state capacity decay. And this is happening in all sectors, whether that be many goods and services that many people living in England, in the UK, in Europe, in the United States take for granted. Things like a stable water supply, stable electricity supply, basic maintenance of infrastructure, road infrastructure, basic services from the government, fighting crime. All of that is deteriorating. So the government wants, according to the idea, as enslaved to the ideology, the ANC wants as much power in the hands of the state as possible, but their capacity to have that centralized power is waning by the year. And that's creating a void, a gap, a power vacuum. And that vacuum, nature abhors a vacuum and power abhors a vacuum as well. And that vacuum can only be filled by one of two factions, the good guys or the bad guys. The bad guys are organized crime, and the good guys are communities that are organizing. And it's no coincidence that South Africa is a case study of where both organized crime and organized communities are flourishing, because there's this void that they're filling. And the good news is that communities are increasingly effectively organizing to become, as we call it, state-proof, creating communities that are resilient and able to stand up for themselves and to provide those goods and services that the government is woefully failing to do. Afrey Forum is one of the organizations at the forefront of pioneering these state-proof solutions. So that's the future of South Africa. my prediction, increased state capacity decay, but also increased organization within communities and increased state proofing. And that's the silver lining, because that's a much better existence than being dependent on the state.
Yes. A little bit sad that you have to do that, but you are right. If if you're up against a state like in South Africa that you can't beat politically, you can't beat in the ballot box, you then have to, at a certain level, reject the state, and you have to look after yourself, your family, your community, and have them three as the priority, and try to do as much as you can for yourself.
And the good news is that in the long term, there is freedom in taking responsibility. I think many other Western nations have become woefully too dependent on their states. The state has just come with a beautiful story of, we'll take care of all these responsibilities. You can sit back and just relax. But what happens when the state uh, can't meet those responsibilities anymore? I mean, there's a competency crisis happening all across the Western world, and complex systems cannot survive a competency crisis, and the government and the state is a complex system. So when it comes to the United States, Europe, we just saw now a massive power outage there in Europe that you saw there almost in your backyard just recently. That's the South Africanization that you are going to increasingly see, unfortunately. And that's also another piece of good news, bittersweet, that I want to give you, is that even though there is likely increased South Africanization in many Western countries becoming more like South Africa, that's the bad news. The good news is that the solution to South Africanization is already being pioneered in South Africa, and you will be able to learn from not just our successes, but our mistakes as well. So keep an eye on what we're doing here. And that's why I'm glad that you are taking the initiative to talk about South Africa, because I think there's a lot of lessons to learn for people abroad, especially in Western countries, especially in Europe and the United States.
That's an excellent point to end on. So when we're looking for new ideas to tackle our incompetent government and our failing state, we've got somewhere to look now, and maybe we'll start stealing some of your ideas. Ernst, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for educating us all on what's going on in South Africa. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and have a good one, Nick.
Thank you. Bye bye.